That's great.
Okay, I think it's live.
So, good afternoon, friends. Today we have with us a very unlikely author, someone who is actually a businessman, a financial services wizard, entrepreneur, son of a politician, and personally I know him. So, a very multifaceted person, and the latest feather, or should I say, rock in his cap, and a very diamond-studded rock is Ameya Prabhu. So, good afternoon, Ameya, and thank you for joining us this afternoon at KLF Bhava Samvad.
Thank you, Rishabh. Thank you for the kind introduction, and thank you to Rashmi ji and all the organizers of Kalinga Lit Fest for having me here. Really, thank you so much.
So, cutting to the chase, first question, Ameya, and this is a very intriguing one. I know your background, the fact that you've been in financial services, I know you're a very conscious person as far as environment is concerned, things like that. But how does a book on short stories happen? Tell us more about it. It's very intriguing. And why should, by the way,
Sorry.
the cover of this new bestseller, what you can call a sleeper hit, Ameya Prabhu's The Rock Babas and the Other Stories. Ameya, for the people, would you want to pick up a copy and show them?
Yeah, sure. I have a copy of my book here with me, and
Yes.
it's it's a book of 9 short stories, and it was available for sale on Amazon from the end of December, and we are now live. So thank you so much, Rishabh, for the lovely introduction. But just going back to your question, I think the one part of the introduction that we forgot was my mother's been a long-term journalist. She's been a writer, an author, and a journalist her entire career, and also a writer. So, as they say, the genes do seep in from both sides. So, no, writing's been in my blood, and I've been writing for many years. It's just that I've not been very formal about it. But I started writing in school. I used to write a lot of poetry, a lot of short stories. I even for Theatre Week in high school, I wrote and directed my own play.
Wow.
So much so that we were not sure that they may allow us to write our own play. So I wrote it under a pseudonym. So my
Wow.
friend and I we made up like a European. So he was a French guy, my friend. We went to an international school, so we made up a European sounding name called George Robert Blavatsky. Like so it sounds like one of those intellectuals from the late 18th century, but the play was written by us. So we wrote, and I've been writing for many years. I've written articles for Business Today, for Money 9 recently. I have also been writing for the Huff Post, for Quint. So, of course, I've been writing for a long time, but the ability, the thing is to write a book needs as much creativity as it needs discipline. I think it really needs a lot of discipline for you to be able to sit down and, write the chapters in, as you say. So I think that's where the lockdown for me at least really helped, because as you mentioned yourself, I do run a financial services and asset management business. So that, as you can imagine, is a really hectic job and keeps me very busy. So I always had ideas for short stories. I used to jot down the themes on my phone or wherever. But when I was stuck in home in Mumbai after the lockdown, I suddenly had a lot of time. So that's when I decided, that I'm not sure when this time will come back again. So let me, sit down and write this book. So I was I would say I was fortunate that I had time at a very difficult time for the world. And I think it's making the best use of whatever life throws at you.
This is wonderful that when people were playing games on a house party or trying to play Ludo, or I don't know how else they were trying to spend their time, we have Ameya Prabhu actually finishing off writing a whole book during the lockdown. I mean, that's a huge inspiration for everyone. And I really like what you said, that, it's all about discipline. I think we all have ideas about doing things and stuff, but to be able to inculcate that discipline. And I have been fortunate to know both your parents, and they're fantastic people, wonderful people, extremely accomplished. So I'm sure not seeped in, but it must have come to you in good measure. It's not just about marginal seeping in. Your father is a chartered accountant, so I'm sure the financial services genes came from there. And of course, Uma Ben is a accomplished journalist for a long time.
Yeah. No, so I think, at the end of the day, we are a sum total of the values that are inculcated in us by our parents and by people who influence us. In my case, it was very heavily my parents and my grandparents. But I do believe that we are a sum total of other experiences, the values that come into us, and in a way, the book speaks about that as well. Because if you see the stories of, because the Rock Babas is a book of 9 short stories, including the eponymous Rock Babas. But you see, the book speaks about the journey of the main characters through the story, and and the experiences that they have, and it's their reaction to those experiences, which actually either assists in building their personality or helping their personality evolve and facing the myriad challenges that they face. So I think that's something which I strongly believe in, and I think it's been true of my own life as well. I think my parents, the values which they inculcated in me, the and my father and my mother were very big on experiences. My father especially was very keen that I actually learn as much through the formal education, but also by experiencing things, visiting places. I remember when he used to always take me to Jallianwala Bagh, or he used to always take me to Ajanta Ellora, for me to go. And and as a byproduct, I believe I'm very interested in history. So even when it comes to let's say politics, or even when it comes to our constitution, or even when it comes to say a lot of the charitable work that we do in our NGO that my mom runs, a lot of it is, as I have learned, actually on the ground, empirically. So I do believe that experiences and values play a big role, and I think a large part of that hypothesis does come out in the book.
Fantastic. And another question. I mean, they say that when people write stories, somewhere it is also an amalgamation of your own experiences, your what you have observed with people you know, and things like that. I was going through the book, and you talk about an aging tycoon. So, is this someone you know, and how did this whole process of storytelling happen? This is Was it just only your imagination, or an amalgamation of people, someone, some trade, something else? How did it happen?
So all the stories are fiction. I think there is actually zero link to any actual person in the stories. So all of them, but of course there are. I would say, I mean, I always do wonder that how would someone, experience, or how would they react to something. Like for example, say you mentioned the first story, the Accidental Philanthropist, which speaks. I mean, I didn't really have any particular inspiration as such for that. But what if you see uh, lately, you've been seeing the Giving Pledge by Warren Buffett and what the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is doing. So there's a huge move towards charity, right, in terms of billionaires giving up their fortunes. But I always wondered, what if someone wants it back? Like you've given your fortune away, but suddenly now you miss it. And while you become this hero for the reason why you've given the fortune away, now that you actually realize that maybe you didn't want to give it away. So that's the hypothesis of the accidental philanthropist. That's why the term is, well, accidental philanthropist. So I mean, I would say that it's not none of the stories are actually based on anyone living, or on an actual person. But there are inspiration. I always believe, how would someone be, how would someone react, so for example, again, if you see The Man with the Beard, which is a story based in Magdalena, Colombia. It's written from the perspective of a travel journalist who encounters the eponymous Man with the Beard, who's a leader of a banana cooperative in Magdalena. Magdalena is the banana producing region of Colombia. So anyone who studied history of Latin America would know that fruit politics, or banana politics to be very precise, played a very important role in the way, say, new imperialism from successive American governments shaped the way politics was, or say regimes were supported in Latin and especially central and northern part of South America. And so that's where the term banana republics, if you look back, and with the United Fruit Company at the time, which today is called well, let's not get into that. But the point is that I think the hence again I wanted to explore it from the other side, about a guy who leads a farmers cooperative and how he deals with standing up to the man, so to say, in terms of standing up to the let's say the larger global corporates. But again, there are undercurrents of so many other themes which also play up in terms of the necessity of day-to-day life for also the workers. So there's idealism on one hand, and I believe that somewhere deep down we're all idealists, but there's also practicality on the other. So how does the confluence of these two exist? So I think a lot of that is spoken in the story. So I mean, there are elements of reality, but the story is fiction, and the characters are fictional.
Fantastic. And another interesting thing I observed. So, I mean, normally when you see someone writing a book on short stories, especially, uh, there are stories or characters or locations which are closer home or all related to each other. But yours is a pretty, right? Pretty. It's a totally international book. You have someone in Japan, someone somewhere else, someone in Latin America. How did this happen? I mean, it's like a truly international book.
That was, if you see, not only is the book international in terms of the settings, even if you see the characters are also, there are male characters, there are female characters, who are important characters. The characters are from diverse religious backgrounds. So you have Buddhist characters, you have a priest who's an Anglican priest, you have Hindu characters, you have characters who are, Muslim. So the reason why we actually it was actually did that was on purpose, because if you see, the stories are about human grit and human fortitude, and how we
Absolutely.
overcome the challenges, or how we, and of course it's said in a very natural manner, but how we overcome the myriad challenges that life throws at us and emerge triumphant. So the reason why the characters were actually based all over the world, and also why they come from myriad backgrounds, was because I wanted to showcase that at the end of the day, ultimately we are human. Ultimately we are one. I think while we might be separated by boundaries, by we might be separated by oceans, we might be coming from different cultures, but essentially as humans we are all one. So I think it's important for that message to go through, because I think the world is becoming increasingly divisive. So I think it's important for us to actually bring in that sense of oneness again. And I think, if again, as I said, that I think idealism is something which is becoming increasingly rare, but I think someone has to be a torchbearer of that. So I think that's what the message of the book is, essentially. And that's what we try to portray. And of course, I've traveled to most of the countries which are mentioned in the book. Of course, I've not climbed the Kanchenjunga, which is where Doc Baba is based. I'd love to, but I've traveled to most of the places, so that also helps, because I've been able to relate with my personal experiences being there.
Fantastic. And I think the fact that you are yourself such a multifaceted person with so many varying interests and things like that, the true breadth of this entire book comes across from your personality, which tell me more about what you were thinking when you were writing this book. What was the underlying message? I know you mentioned grit and everything. How much of this book is you yourself? Tell us more about the
You know,
person
so
behind.
I like to put myself in situations. I think, uh, so the book, as I said, is a product of my imagination. And what I wanted to convey through the book is, imagine, I would say, various scenarios or situations. So, for example, let's take the case of the story of the Broken Nightingale, which is about a singer who is a very well-known singer. She reaches the heights of success, but because of family issues and because of other things, she starts drinking, and then that actually brings her down. But again, towards the end, she showcases some grit, and again tries to bloom. Like, so again, I put myself thinking that, because we all think that the artists, or it could be it's a singer, it could be an actor, it could be a sportsman. We are so, especially in India, we quickly put them on such a high pedestal. We put them, and we imagine that, I mean, today if Virat Kohli makes a duck like he did today, everyone's going and criticizing him, but the next day he does well, we are all celebrating. So we put them on such high pedestals, and we're so rapidly easy to abandon them, that we forget that they're also humans, that they are also literally like you and me. And it's very difficult for some of these people to digest success, because the road up is relatively tough, but one can get there, because but the road down is very rapid, for these people. So again, I put myself in that situation, thinking how would someone be, how would someone react. And of course mine is a person of it's imagination. But so I think the message which I wanted to convey from the book is, I actually wanted us to be less judgmental, as human beings, because we are very quick to pass judgment. We're very quick to say things about the other without realizing, or without putting ourselves in the other person's shoes. So it's very, and so for example, say Memoirs of a Dictator, which is a fictional story of an African dictator, and he writes it from his perspective. He's writing his own autobiography, and you see the way he looks at himself. And then in the end, if we have the actual things of what happened as it's written in the media. But I always believe that even some of these so-called dictators don't actually think they're doing wrong. A lot of the times what they're doing, they actually genuinely feel that I'm doing the right thing. It's only that when they look at it from a different perspective. So everybody writes things from the perspective of the opposition. But when do you ever hear an autobiography of a dictator? So that's why I wanted to put that in. And again, I put the other perspective for the audience to actually see what the reality is. So I think life is not about black and white. Unfortunately, we like to put things in black and white, but life is a lot of gray, and even the best people have some worse characteristics, and the worst people have some good characteristics. So I think one needs to explore those things, and I think in a way the book does that, right? It explores the aspects of human persona, which maybe usually you just don't really look at.
Fantastic. I think you're right, because I was just thinking of, when you're mentioning this, there is this very famous quote. I'm not sure who said it, that until and unless the lion learns how to ride, history will always glorify the hunter. So there is always a question of perspective, right? Of how things are. And I know for sure that you have seen things that's, especially when you talk about power and things like that, at such close quarters. For those of us in the audience who may not know, Ameya's father is the most accomplished politician of the country, Mr. Suresh Prabhu, and he's seen, and he definitely is one of the most humblest persons I've come across. Uh, Even if he was not what he was as a human being, he's a gem of a person, and definitely one of the most humble, and of course, as everyone knows, extremely accomplished. So, Ameya, I think you have that unique viewpoint, or you've seen these things at such close quarters. Perhaps you have that possibility of looking at things from every perspective, which most people would miss. As you said, people would react to how the news would be on today, Virat Kohli scoring a duck and tomorrow scoring a century. People just go get swayed by the random inputs that they get, and they form their opinions. But another aspect which I know of you, which you're very passionate about, is the environment, and also the whole sustainability movement. Uh, where does this part of your personality come from, or how does that fit into your life?
I think environmental system. I think firstly, the way we speak about the environment, or climate, or rather, let's say the environment, it's as if it's a aspect which is separate. And they say, oh, we need to look after the environment. That's how we usually speak about it. What we usually forget is we are ourselves a part of the environment. We are an essential part of the ecosystem, right? We are also, so it's like saying that, oh, mere ko rasta saaf rakhna hai. But you forget that the rasta is a part of your city, of your locality. It's like, so it's the same thing. So we are such an essential part of the environment. What we do, how we consume, how we emit, it's such an important element which is so interlinked. And that said, so it's very important for us to work in a way wherein we preserve the environment, and not from any altruistic nature, but from a very selfish reason, because it is the world we live in. Now, for example, say climate change, and I've been shouting about this for many years. I also sit on the board of Climate Group in India, and Climate Group is
Mhm.
one of the premier climate advocacy groups around the world. We also organize Climate Week in New York around the time of the General Assembly. So, and again, with what we've been trying to, of course, first was on renewable energy, but even now on climate change, we always, there was a thought that, oh, India is a poor country, why should we, pay for the sins of the people who emitted? Fair enough, what was done in the past was wrong, but we have to remember that when climate changes, it actually affects the cropping patterns in India, and it actually, the biggest people who get affected by it are the poorest farmers of India, and we really need to look at that aspect of it. So the climate is something I'm very passionate about. I think it's important for development. For some reason, again, there is a thought that climate is against development. A lot of the environmentalists, they are like, oh, ye band karo, wo band karo. We don't need this. We don't need that. We don't. Why are you building that bridge? Or why are you putting? I think you also have to remember that at the end of the day, poverty alleviation is very important. I think we need to ensure that livelihoods are protected for people at all parts of society. We have to ensure a minimum standard of living for them. But at the same time, we have to do that in a way wherein the environment is protected. Now, can that be done? Yes, it can. The technologies are available today for you to be able to do that. What it does, it find it increases the cost slightly. But again, now how do you look at cost, right? In economics, there is something called externality. Externality basically is the, and again, unfortunately, externalities aren't priced in your cost of production. So what I did for my actually for my IB 12 standard project was I actually priced in externalities into a lot of infrastructure projects, and that actually gives you the actual cost of that infrastructure. Similarly, for example, we always say that let us, let's make arguments saying let's work very hard, do very well at a job, and earn good money. But what we are doing is we are only looking at the price that we are paying in terms of hours that we are putting in. We're not looking at the externalities. That is the damage we are doing to our family life, the damage we are doing to our mental life, what we are consuming, our health. So those are all externalities. So now if I put that in an environmental context, the minute you start pricing those things in, the cost of service delivery and cost of goods goes up. But at the end of the day, that's far cheaper from a long-term perspective. So I think one has to bring that in. One has to also understand that we are only one element of the ecosystem, right? You have animals, you have plants, you have birds. So you really need to think of every element of the ecosystem and go forward. And I think that is something which I personally hold very close to my heart, in terms of. But again, I'm not the kind of person who will be out there and, I think one has to be practical about it. One has to focus on sustainable development. So, but at the same time, one has to be very, very conscious about the fact that we need to protect our ecosystem.
Wonderful thought, and I think what you said is the most important thing today, because while there is so much of fragmentation in society between the haves and the have-nots, and each one trying to bring across something to the table which is not acceptable to the other. Any development or any discussion has to be sustainable. So I totally echo and understand your viewpoint on this, and thank you for sharing this with the audience about how we should be looking at things. It's not just about what it appears, whether, as you mentioned, whether it's a job or what toll anything takes on us. It's not just the most apparent thing right in front. And from whatever you're saying, it is very clear that you've thought this quite a bit, and I know you're a very thoughtful person, which brings me to another very interesting aspect of your personality, of your family life, which is the fact that your entire family is deeply spiritual. Your mother is deeply into heartfulness meditation. She is also a heartfulness meditation trainer. You yourself are a meditator. I know Sureshji is a very deeply spiritual person himself. Tell me how it was growing up in this very spiritual environment in the Prabhu household, and how it has shaped you for what you are today.
Sure. So my father, very early on in life, maybe when he was in his mid 20s, met with a guru who was based out of Gurgaon, and we call him Guruji. And if you see the kada we wear, this it's a bit disfigured now, but it's all as a thanks to him. And of course, later on in life, my mother also encountered and was very lucky to meet Chariji, who was the leader of Sahaj Marg then, and which is now called Heartfulness. And so we've been very fortunate that we've had some very strong spiritual gurus or spiritual leaders who've been able to guide us. Because if you ask me, I think spirituality goes far beyond religion. Because I feel religion is ultimately limited in terms of its its breadth of what it gets to. But the beauty of spirituality is it's actually like air. Anyone can breathe it, and everyone can benefit from it. So I think we've been very fortunate. We've been very fortunate to have a guide. People can go their entire life without find or many or without finding a guide. But here we were very lucky to have both Guruji and Chariji and now Daji as our spiritual leaders. And I think it's enabled us, or rather, it's enabled us to deal very well with both success and failure. Because firstly, I don't think there is anything called success or failure. All of it is the same. I believe that everything that nature gives you is the same. It's all a blessing. Even if it's sometimes success can be bad and failure can be good. At the end of the day, because all of these are human terms: success, failure, good, bad. So what really is that it's all of what is given to you by, say, the higher power is always a positive thing, and we almost must take it as a positive thing. Similar, hence, when I was locked down in my apartment, I decided to write a book, because for me, I need to take it as a positive thing. And I think that is something which comes from spirituality. That is something which, that ability to deal with complex situations, not get overawed by it, and break it down to a very simple truth that life is good, life is positive, and one must live positively, is something which I think spirituality gives you. And I think I'm very blessed to have grown up in a household where I learned these lessons very early on.
Fantastic. And I mean, I know that this is huge influence on you otherwise also. But what would be your message when you look at the world in general today, the youth that is there, and especially for the youth, you're a big icon today, because the fact that, I mean, not only are you so well accomplished in so many other fields, but as I mentioned, when others were busy playing Ludo and doing house party and I don't know what else, binging on Netflix during the lockdown, you're actually writing a book. What would be your message be to your readers and to the youth in general?
I think we as that's if people still consider me as a youth, where I'm 34 now, but I think we as the generation which is coming up, and the generation which will be in positions of power and leadership, and in the next few years, I think what is very important for us is to realize that the world is moving at a very rapid pace. I do remember that it's moving faster than when my parents were my age, and a lot faster than when my grandparents were my age. So the world is very dynamic, the world is moving very rapidly, and the challenges are actually very, very large. So, for example, the sort of challenges one might have had across 2 or 3 generations, we have them 2 or 3 times now in one generation. So I think one thing is, we all need to keep an open mind. Whenever you have challenges, there is a natural tendency to find someone to blame, or there's a natural tendency to find, to go inwards. And if history has taught us anything, is that when any nation, or if any community or any people have gone inwards, let me go a bit. So there are two elements to it, right? One is inward into yourself, in terms of looking inwards, looking into yourself, meditating, and that is a good thing. But what I meant by inwards is not having a broader view of life, thinking that, being narrow minded, is what I meant by inwards. Or shutting yourself off to other experiences, shutting yourself off to other. So I think that is something which one should not do. I think one should engage, one should listen to the opposing point of view, and it's very important for one, or for the youth, to be able to work cohesively and collaboratively with people in order to solve some of the challenges. Secondly, we really need to be flexible, because as I said, the world is changing so rapidly. One has to be very flexible, one has to be very malleable, to be able to twist and turn and manage. For example, one fine day you'll have to just move your office and start working from home. Another fine day, something will go completely obsolete. And I mean, you might be in a business which in 3 years might be obsolete completely. You never know. I mean, those earphones. I'm wearing an AirPod now, but those earphones which used to be there, I mean, they're going obsolete. Similarly, cameras. I mean, this phone of mine which I use, I don't take a camera with me when I travel anymore, because the quality of the pictures that I can take with the phone, which also does 10 other things for me, is making the camera obsolete. So unless you're a professional photographer, so I think the obsolescence is going up so much, so that one has to be flexible. Because if you hold yourself onto something too tight, you might become a dinosaur. So it's very important to be flexible and to keep evolving. And I think most importantly, I think we need to realize that we also are intergenerational trustees. I remember one of the government houses we were staying in Delhi, and my mum was going about planting lots and lots of trees and fruit trees. And I asked my parents that why are you planting so many things? Because by the time these bear fruit, we probably won't live here. And my mom just looked at me and she said, "Listen, that's not the right way to think. You have to remember that you are a trustee, that you need to, as long as this is in your hands, you need to look after it well and leave it for the next person. And whoever come, maybe the next person also won't bear fruit. Maybe two people later, because someone was living in that house. So in Delhi, of Lutyens Delhi houses. So someone was probably living there 100 years ago, during the British time. So the point is, it's very important for us, and that's what got me thinking that we need to think about the planet like that. At the end of the day, that's we all are guests on this planet. We are all there for a few years, and then somebody else will come on and live on that planet. So we are essentially intergovernmental. So trustees are not just some people who are sitting on the board of an educational institution or sitting on the board of or heartfulness schools. We are all trustees here on this planet, and we really need to and we really need to think like that, because a lot of generations haven't thought like that. People have gone and hunted and killed tigers and said, "Oh, look at how a brave man I am, that I can shoot a tiger with a gun from so far away." I mean, I don't know how people think that that is any form of bravado. But I mean, at the end of the day, we have to preserve wildlife, we have to preserve the environment, we have to preserve species, and we are all trustees. None of us own anything. When we go, we'll own nothing, and definitely we don't own this planet. So I think that is something which the youth really needs to think about.
Well, that's a wonderful thought that you've mentioned about us being trustees. And I think it is really heartening that, and I'm sure most people still consider you youth. I mean, given the numbers that we have in public life, especially in India, I think you would definitely qualified to be youth. But it's wonderful that whether you're a youth or not, but people are thinking in those lines. People who have the privilege of looking at life in every aspect, and yet are so conscious in terms of uh, what life really means for us. The fact that we are just trustees for a different generation, whether it's before or after. I think that's a wonderful thought. And this brings me to the next question I have is short stories. What next? And for those in the audience who don't know, Ameya has just got married. So are we going to see a romantic book next?
There is a romantic story in this book itself. It's called The Shepherd, and it's my wife's favorite story. Actually, it's not mine personally, but my wife loves it. And I mean, even when we were dating, she used to read all my stories, and so she read The Shepherd, and even till date, it's her favorite story. So there is a romantic story in this book. So the reason I wrote short stories was because I find that the modern reader's ability to read a novel is going down. And that's
That
why
is
we prefer a 1 hour web series over a 2.5, 3 hour movie. So the beauty of this book is that you can read a story, it'll take you an hour and a half or 2 hours to read, depending on how fast you read, and maybe you pick it up 2 weeks later and you can actually just pick it up and read a completely different story, right? So you don't actually have to put a bookmark. You don't actually have to think that, oh, kya hua tha pichle story mein, at least in a web series you have the first 45 seconds in previously on this episode, like, whereas here you don't have that, right? So I think that's the beauty of it. You can actually be able to, so that's why I chose the short stories as a medium. And I would like to thank, of course, Rishabh, for connecting me with Gautam Padmanabhan well, actually, I should officially thank our friend Rishabh Kothari, who, when I spoke to him, said, I know a great publisher, and he connected me with Westland, which is a part of Amazon. And again, my publisher, Gautam Padmanabhan, who believed in me, because short stories are a medium which I believe are coming back, but aren't a traditionally popular medium. So thank you again, Gautam, and VK Kartika, my editor, and also Rashi, who's my Rashi Mal, who heads my marketing. So they really believed, and I think next, I haven't really thought that far. So I've been writing stuff. So I recently wrote an article for Kindle for Amazon, which will
okay.
be published as a part of the promotions for this book. And I'm also will be writing I have a few ideas in mind. There is, I'm a big history buff, as I said, and I've always found alternative history very fascinating. So this could be one thought on those lines. Maybe I'll release my play. I was editing my play, which I've written. I wrote when I was 17, so I really need to bring it up to speed because I was back in 2003. So I need to, so 17 years ago, actually, exactly. So I really, so might release that, or maybe something entirely new. But I'll definitely write more. I don't see this as the end. But the interesting thing is, I've also been contacted by a few filmmakers, who have been interested in adapting some of the stories into a book. And both the rock bar. I think the some of the stories could make interesting books. Sorry, not into a book, sorry, into a movie. My bad. Adapting the stories into a movie, or pardon me. So I think they could make interesting movies, or could make an interesting short format web series. So maybe that could be next. Who knows? I mean, I would love to shoot somewhere in Orissa, which is probably one of my favorite states in India, one of the most beautiful states in our country. I think it's a country, it's a state, and maybe I would certainly like to set a story in Orissa, either in Konark or in Chilka or in Gopalpur or somewhere in the lovely state of Orissa, Bolangir, where my good friend Arkesh is from. So would love to, be based there.
That's a wonderful thought, and I think yes, uh, I think there is so much our country has to offer, and Odisha is steeped into history. And for someone who's a history buff like you, I'm sure that you'll find several very many interesting perspectives, both from the historical aspect or the lifestyle of the people, the things that they do, and the kind of people they are. And of course, with given the very keen sense of observation that you have, I'm sure you will find enough to and more to kind of let your creative juices kind of flow. As far as this is concerned, we have a message from social media. Mr. Ashutosh Kumar Thakur saying that I have no hesitation universally to recommend this book, which is a must read for all age groups. Great work, Ameya. Ashutosh ji, I wholeheartedly agree with you, and he's saying some more things. Ameya has a gripping style of writing. Rock Babas is a collection of heartwarming stories wherein each of us in different stages of life can have varying takeaways. At least one of the stories will provide an eye opener to most of us. And if we pay heed to lead us to the turn which has potential to change our lives positively. That's a wonderfully put thought. Your comments on what Ashutosh ji is saying.
So thank you, Ashutoshji, and if you're watching, it's very humbling that you have, your words are really encouraging, for any creative person and also an author, like myself. I think ultimately it's the satisfaction of the reader that matters the most. Ultimately we are all creative people, and it's what the how the readers react and how they perceive it is what is the greatest success for any author. So I think thank you so much, and that was a really lovely comment, and I really appreciate the this thing, and I do hope that you can also. I mean, I do hope that you can recommend the book to people. We are available on at all major bookstores, but also on Amazon. We know Amazon, Westland being our publisher, so one can easily buy the book on Amazon.in, or actually, if you're watching it outside India, on any of your Amazon local Amazon websites. It's already been bought in 30 plus countries. I mean, the amazing thing is, thanks to Amazon, I mean, the link is also on the screen. People have bought it in countries as diverse as Argentina, Mexico, to Japan, Korea, Australia, Russia, Switzerland, almost. So I think it's amazing the reach of the book that Amazon provides. And again, I'd like to thank my publisher for that. And people, just today morning, an Emirati friend of mine, one of my good friends, who's on a yacht sailing. He's a big sailor, and he's that's how he spends his weekends. And he's with his wife, and he sent me a picture that even while sailing, I'm reading your book.
Wow.
I got another video sent by a friend of mine this morning from Japan. It was afternoon in Japan, and they love the Accidental Philanthropist. Even the so I've been very lucky that way. That and also we've had some great commendations. So of course, our senior political leadership in India, I presented it to them, and they also liked it. But also His Highness Sheikh Mansour bin Zayed Al Nahyan, who's the Deputy Prime Minister of the UAE, and also the Minister of Presidential Affairs. Uh, Not only did he commend me on the book and he liked it, though I loved the ending of what he wrote to me was, I do hope you don't need another lockdown for you to be inspired to write your next book. So I did appreciate his lovely sense of humor while mentioning that. So I think that was really good. So I think from the perspective of, I think this book is something which I'm very, and I mean, it's the feedback from the people, which keeps us strong as an author. And similarly, I think it's the fact that people, I mean, organizers such as the Kalinga Lit Fest and also Rashmi ji inviting me. It really, it's very humbling. I think one can only say that success should bring you more humility, because I think that is the most important thing.
Yes, but I think every all the success that you have been receiving, the accolades are. I mean, you deserve all of it. I mean, as I said, the book has been rocking everywhere, and in no measure, it's been very well received. And of course, the person behind it is itself so interesting. It's not just about the book. The fact that you're so multifaceted and you have so many diverse interests, apart from just being someone who's just looking at either enjoying his life or making money or things like that. And this, it's very interesting to see so many different aspects of your life coming out in this, which makes me wonder one thing. You mentioned about the fact that you've already been getting offers um, to convert the stories to movies or short format or whatever. How different is the storytelling format when you talk about actually writing in long form and you're talking about something which you can visually show? Would you like to look at that as a explore that aspect as a creative person, where you are more effective in conveying your story, or you would rather play with words?
So I play a lot of cricket, and I'm using the analogy. So depending on where you play and what the pitch is, your
Hmm.
entire batting, bowling, fielding strategy is different. If you're playing on, even and especially when you're not playing on a ground, you're playing in people's homes or some other grounds. So if you're playing on astroturf, you play a certain way. If you're playing on turf, you play a certain way. If you're playing, in India, we play a lot of street cricket. So you have different rules. Either laga to out, udhar laga to, all of those things. So again, your entire strategy is different. Like I remember, even if you play with a world class player on a ground where your rules are a certain way, you might actually beat that world class player. So coming back to creativity and storytelling. So if you look at storytelling, there are different mediums, right? You have the medium of writing, you have a medium of short stories, novels, you have the medium of a of a movie, or it could even be a TikTok story or an Instagram story, which is increasingly effective. And or if you see, I mean, I believe that the greatest marketing, or let's say one of the strongest PR people who ever was Gandhiji, because he without a television, only with the radio, without he managed to relate with every villager in India, or spread his message to every villager in India. And a simple man carrying a stick managed to shake the mighty British Empire. So I think telling a story can be done in very different ways. Sometimes it can just be an image as well, but it's different. So I think if the way I would write for a book would be very different from the same story being told on screen. And again, on screen, it would depend on whether if it's a movie or if it's a web series, right? Or if it's a shorter format. So I think, but what is important is that the essence should be the same. It's like, for example, you need to take haldi as for your immunity. You can take it in the capsule. You can mix haldi with pepper in hot water. You can have it in your food. But the essence of haldi is important, to take. So that's what I'm saying. The story's essence is important, but the way you portray it, the way it'll always vary. And I mean, to be honest, I almost went to film school, to be very honest. So well, after my undergrad, I when I was writing plays, I wanted to go to film school or do theater. But my father said that, why don't you study something like economics, or for a few years. So I read economics, politics, and international studies as an undergrad. and then I started my business. So I could never really go back to what I wanted to do at the time. But I mean, so hence I wanted to write the book for many years. So, but now that I've done it, if life does take me at least partially in that direction in terms of further expressing my creative outlets, I'll be happy to look into that.
Wonderful. I think that's a very well explained thing. How we can look at short stories, and the formats make all the difference, and yet the essence is the same. But as you mentioned, why you chose to write a short story over say a full blown novel is about the decreasing amount of time and attention span that people have. And this also brings me to another point, which is that it is said, and I'm not an author, but you can comment, is that to say things in a concise fashion is far more difficult than to write it in the long form. So I think it's much more difficult to sit down and write a short story and convey an entire message in fewer words than what you could perhaps do in 3x or 4x. Did you think that, were you conscious of this, that you wanted to finish in a more precise or more of a pressy manner?
I'm sure. I mean, I would agree with you that it's more difficult, but I'm sure there are guys who are writing novels who wouldn't. So I think the point is that yes, I do believe that it is tougher to, you know, I know in business school they made us do one of the things wherein we had to do a task, and they gave us 1 hour, 45 minutes, 30 minutes, and 10 minutes to do the same task. And the
Wow.
interesting thing is that the quality of that task fundamentally, so we ended up discussing a lot more when we had 1 hour. We really didn't discuss much when we had 15 or 10 minutes. But the quality was not that much worse, is what, it was not as good as the 1 hour, but it was passable. And I've never forgotten that, even though it was many years. So I do believe that what you can convey in a long form, you can also convey in a short form. The question is, it's just slightly different. It's so. But again, there will be people still like Test cricket, people still like one day, and people still like T20. T20 is a lot more hectic. I mean, anyone who's played T20 will know that you actually it's far more hectic than playing 5 days of Test cricket. But it doesn't make it a better form. Each form is unique. So I think it's I think there's a space for everything. I think there's a space for short stories. There's a space for a novel, and I mean, those who love to read it, there's still a space for a 1,000-page Anna Karenina sort of a book, because that's the stories evolving. That's really culture. I mean, that's a book which will remain true for 200 years, maybe longer. Who knows? So I think there's a form for each. There's a place for each format, and I would definitely like to write across formats, hopefully, rather than being a one format person. So let's see. I think time will tell.
Yes, but I won't be surprised if the success of this book heralds a new spree of short story kind of publications, as you had mentioned earlier, that amongst all the format, short stories are not necessarily the most happening, but the way this book has succeeded and the reception that it has got, it will not be a stretch to imagine that short stories may make a comeback, and people actually prefer to read short stories for all the advantages that they bring across than to wait, kind of labor through a 1,000 book, 1,000 page Anna Karina. Of course, there's no comparison. I mean, it's not like it's not a competition, or it's not that
Yeah.
you can it's not apples and oranges. So,
Yeah.
but
No,
I'm sure
I'm
that
certain. Yeah. No, I'm certain that. Sorry, I'm certain that there definitely will be an advent of, because the modern person doesn't have the time to read. It's sad, but they'll probably read on a flight, or they'll probably read between things. So while they're consuming media, they're increasingly consuming visual media as opposed to actually reading. So, but so that's why I think short stories can play an important role going forward. If we can convey the same I mean, I'm sure I could have written some of these stories in a much longer format, but I think if we can, I definitely believe that people will increasingly write short stories. And I mean, if inspired by this book, more people are writing it, I think there's nothing better than that.
absolutely. And I think we are just coming towards the end of the conversation. We don't have too much of time. Couple of thoughts, which is one is we know something about Ameya, the author, the creative person, the environmentally conscious person. But what is really Ameya all about? What are your other interests? Tell us more. And I'm sure there are so many of your fans now who have kind of logged in to hear more about the book and you. Tell us more about you, the person.
Well, I mean, in terms of, I do like to. I mean, I must confess that I love watching movies. I mean, I even while I was writing, I was definitely taking some time out every day to watch stuff on. I mean, movies or some of these web series. I really like watching stuff, and I like watching stuff in every language. Like I watch stuff from Finland, Iceland, Indian. I think the quality of the content which is out now is phenomenal. And I think the amount of opportunities that artists have around the world to express themselves, is it's too good. So I love that. I love to travel, and I've traveled to over 75 countries, and not just country. I love to travel around India. I think there's so much to see in our country itself. I think that tourism in the future can be a very large percentage of our GDP, and probably has the potential to be a big job creator. I mean, I just mentioning the state of Odisha itself, but I mean, there's so much to see in India. The cultural diversity of our country. I think the entire cultural diversity of the world on one hand, and that's the amount of cultural diversity we have in our country. And I mean, the beauty is that, let's say, my wife and I don't even speak the same language. She speaks Gujarati, I speak Marathi, and yet we are. So I mean, very few people can imagine that. For them to have, and it's normal for Indians to be born with 4 or 5 languages. To speak. So so I love to travel. I like to play sport. I mean, I actually will be rushing off to a cricket game later today. So I do like to play sport and watch sport quite a bit. And I do enjoy reading history. I enjoy reading history. I enjoy reading politics. I enjoy reading actually almost anything. I spent a lot of time last year reading about viruses, as you can imagine, to understand more. And but I love to read. And other than that, I do also love investing. I think that, or I love, I'm fascinated by the entrepreneurial spirit of India, and I love the fact that the confidence of the Indian youth. We spoke about the youth earlier, and you see that in cricket, right? You have guys who come from Ennore, you have guys who come from Salem, you have like T. Natarajan, who came to us, guys who are simple people, or you have Mohammed Siraj, who comes from a but if you see from Hyderabad, but if you see, you have simple people, come from difficult backgrounds, with the confidence they go to Australia or they go to any place, and the way they excel, as if they have been born to rule the world. And I think if you can't admire that of the Indian youth, then there's nothing you can admire, because, and I think that's going to be showcased everywhere, in sport, in politics. I mean, I think the fact that our country, you can have a prime minister who essentially was a chaiwala to go and become one of the world leaders. I think it's the greatest strength of Indian democracy. So that shows how strong our democratic roots are. And if you see, as much as people might talk about dynasties, etc., if you see the number of people in India who actually come from nothing to become, politicians at different levels, or bureaucrats at different levels, is really phenomenal. That actually showcases the robustness of our system. That clearly something our framers of our constitution and successive governments have done right. That the poor can be upwardly mobile. So I think that is something which is I'm really admire. And thirdly, in business, I mean, you see, when you were saying about being a youth. I think the real icons are kids who are 18, 20-year olds. When I see them and their entrepreneurship, their confidence, their ability to deal with things, and not just in Mumbai. I mean, I'm from Mumbai. But why should I look at Mumbai? You go to the rural parts of India, what you see among these people and their desire to do things. We should not worry about our country. I think our country is in such safe hands. I think the future youth of our country, our young boys and girls, are going to do a phenomenal job. So I think, and I think the growth is not going to come while the growth centers might be Mumbai, but the growth is going to be spread out all over the country. You'll see growth in Imphal, you'll see growth in the Garo Hills, in the northeast, you'll see Eswal, you'll see growth in Ranchi, you'll see growth in places like Deoghar in Jharkhand, in Ennore in Tamil Nadu, you'll see in Vijayawada, you'll see all over the place. I mean, as we are speaking at Kalinga, list West place like Balangir, Rourkela. I mean, you will the amount what or West Bengal, Asansol, or you will see these places really rise up, and I think that is what really makes me believe in India. It's not the success of a Mumbai or a Delhi, but it's the confidence and the success that's going to come up in these places, and that's what makes me very bullish on my country.
No, great. Thanks a lot. I think we just have 2 minutes before we need to wrap up. It's almost four. And this has been a very enriching and a very interesting and exciting conversation. So my final suggestion or request to you would be, what would be your message to all your fans and all your readers and everyone out there who are watching this right now live, or will be catching up on this whenever they have the time? Because today, I think online gives us that advantage. I mean, when you can tune into something you want to watch at a time convenient to you, rather than having to block off a time. So your final message to them, or your whatever you want to talk to your fans out there.
No, I think, guys, I just hope that you enjoy the book, and feel free to, I'm available on all social media. Feel free to write both positive and negative criticism. I think happy to hear both. I think both are equally important. And if you can take away a message from the book, it's just to be more open-minded. I think be more open-minded with the world. Be more, I think, be confident in your ability. I think the greatest strength we have is our own positivity. Be positive in terms of going out and giving that man. And most importantly, I think I was watching some show somewhere which says one shouldn't worry too much. I think that is, one, no matter what the level of issues that life throws at you, trust me, your mind is much stronger. And I think that's what spirituality also teaches you. The strongest thing in the world is your own mind, so you can conquer anything. So most important is to believe in yourself, and yeah, and and keep reading. I think that's an important part of keep reading, because reading leads to learning, and learning leads to a better world. So I think that's also an important aspect.
Wonderful. I think that's a great message for everyone. And so thank you, Ameya, for this wonderful afternoon. I know you have a cricket match to go to, but thank you for sparing the time to be a part of this conversation. And I'm sure whatever you have mentioned today is going to stay with all our viewers, and also inspire a lot of youth to not only write more, but also the message of enterprise and entrepreneurship that you spoke about. I think that's a huge message. It's a huge positive message for everyone, and I'm sure that a lot of people will be extremely enthused and extremely encouraged and extremely inspired by this message of yours. So thank you, Ameya. Thank you, everyone at Kalinga Literary Festival, for making such a fantastic platform, making such interactions possible, and bringing to us such wonderful authors. And frankly speaking, for me, this is all as much about the person behind the book rather than only the book. We all get to read the book and know more, but it is fascinating to see the person behind that book, and perhaps through such conversations, read the person, understand the person, and know more about it. And it was wonderful to interact with someone as multifaceted and as dynamic as Ameya Prabhu. So thank you, everyone at Kalinga Literary Festival. Thank you, Ameya. And to all our viewers, have a great weekend, and do keep watching for the next event happening online at KLF. Thank you, everyone. And definitely, the link has been shown quite a few times. Otherwise, just Google Rock Babas, and you will find the most rocking book of the year easily available on all channels. So thank you, Ameya, and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ji. Thank you so much.